I hope everyone had a lovely lunch. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers joining us through the back of the room. My name is Andrew Graham, and I'm president of the Canadian Club of Toronto and your host for today. Viewers, thank you for joining us. Our club is proud of our track record of bringing you decision makers and thought leaders to discuss the issues of the day. I often like to talk about how a few years ago I think there was fear amongst clubs like the Canadian Club about what the internet would mean for people getting together over lunch hour to enjoy conversation and hear a speaker at length. Because I think there was a fear that maybe we wouldn't have that anymore. It would be all 140 characters or 280 characters. And I think the success and the ongoing interest that there is in events like this really shows how the internet has actually helped, or I guess shown the need for more events like this. People want to hear thoughtful speeches like we're going to hear today from the minister. And I think it's also a great opportunity to sit down at a table with people, many of whom you may know, some of whom you may not know, some of whom you may agree with, and others whom you may not agree with, and exchange views. I think that's also rarer today when you can watch TV or read media that only agrees with your point of view. So if anyone did anyone sit beside anyone disagreeable today at their table? No. We won't ask you to admit that publicly. We're also very proud of the sponsors that we have that make events like today possible. Really want to thank Morneau Chappelle, represented here by Wesley Sheridan. Thank you for your generous support. And I'd also like to welcome the youth and young leaders joining us today from Civic Action. Do you want to identify yourselves? Over there. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker and the important topic she is speaking about. Human trafficking. It's often called modern-day slavery, and Ontario is a focal point for it in Canada. According to the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, 2/3 of reported cases happen in our province. The victims are largely women and children. Today's guest speaker wants to put an end to this predatory and criminal behavior. In her role as Minister of Children, Community and Social Services, with responsibility for women's issues, immigration and poverty reduction, the Honourable Lisa MacLeod sees how violence against women and children and poverty intersect with human trafficking. Her ministry is focused on raising awareness about the adverse impacts of human trafficking and what we can do about it. Minister MacLeod has been an MPP for 12 years, representing the riding of Nepean. Always active and engaged, she served in the opposition as Vice Chair of the Legislative Assembly Committee, the Government Agencies Committee, and the Public Accounts Committees. She was a vocal critic in major portfolios, including Finance, Treasury Board, and Education. Minister MacLeod was instrumental in obtaining support for initiatives that include making Queen's Park family-friendly. We heard a bit about that at lunch when, just at in the early part of your tenure as an MPP, she led a cross-party motion to change the sitting hours of Queen's Park to make it much more friendly to mothers and fathers, which is, I think, a terrific initiative. She's a Nova Scotian native and has been recognized for her political work. She was awarded the 2018 Eve Award for her efforts to advance women in politics. You might say that she's something of a celebrity as well in the Ottawa region. She was named top 25 in the capital as well as top 50 in the capital. Minister MacLeod, I'm pleased to pass the Canadian Club of Toronto's podium over to you.
Thanks very much for that kind introduction. That was very kind of you. I do have a few colleagues that are here today from our government, and I wanted to recognize them. Obviously, the Honourable Laurie Scott, the Minister of Labour, is here today, and Laurie, it's wonderful for you to join us. I'll speak more about the work that Laurie has been doing in this space a little bit later, but she's had an incredible week, and I admire her strength, and I really appreciate the work that she's done in human trafficking before. So thanks very much, Laurie, for being here. I have two parliamentary assistants. They're MPPs from the Kitchener-Waterloo area. So Amy Fee is the MPP for Kitchener-Hespelar. And my other PA is Belinda Carey-Holos, and she is from Cambridge. And my really good friend, Sharif Sabaway, is here from Mississauga Air Mills. It's great for you to be here. So thanks very much. As was mentioned, I inherited 5 ministries. So about 5 months ago, there were 5 Liberals ministers that were doing my job. And in the spirit of efficiencies and making sure that we find a leaner government, I inherited those 5 ministries. So it's been very exciting for me. The Minister of Finance calls me the Minister of many things, while the Government House Leader calls me the Minister of everything. And I can assure you, we do take our roles seriously. But truth be told, we at the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services are the heart of the people's government. It is true that my ministry is full of sad stories of people who are living in vulnerable circumstances. Many of these stories are heartbreaking. Some are unbelievable. Some I'll share today. They're children at risk, families struggling on social assistance, integrating into Canadian life as a refugee, or a woman fleeing violence. We decide how best to deliver services and how to provide those supports to our most vulnerable in order to stabilize them and help get their lives back on track. When I was asked to speak at the Canadian Club, I didn't hesitate to accept. As Canada's podium of record, I've attended many of your events over the years on a variety of topics, which have been wide-ranging, and which topic I was asked to speak about, I didn't hesitate, made a split-second decision. This is Women's History Month. You started it with Gender Equity Week, and we have had International Day of the Girl as well. And I thought I could have approached this speech in 2 ways. The first was the easy way out: express platitudes, use some flowery language about gender diversity and quotas, and maybe talk a little bit about the gender gap. Round off my speech about how far we've come as women and congratulate everyone, and it could have been something really uplifting, but it would have been forgettable. Or I could choose the more difficult and contemplative approach and really take stock of what's happening in Ontario, where the platitudes are not only unfamiliar to some women, they would be completely meaningless, because a quota cabinet and gender parity is irrelevant to a sex slave. And I cannot, in good faith, address women's issues without addressing sex trafficking. The women I want to tell you about today have been dehumanized and victimized. They are conditioned, coerced, and they are trafficked for profit. When their trafficker is finished with them, they're often destitute, no credit, broke, dealing with intense psychological challenges, and they're alone. This is Ontario's dirty little secret. And it's an uncomfortable topic. I felt it was important to have a frank discussion with leaders in our province so we could let the sun shine in on the uncomfortable truths that too many Ontario women and girls are facing across Ontario, even from strong families, good communities, and safe neighborhoods. My hope is today that you learn what sex trafficking is, you see the types of women who are preyed upon, and it will surprise you. And you will leave here today, I'm sure, wondering how you can help end this sinister practice. It won't be uplifting, but it will be meaningful, and it's entirely up to you whether or not you think this speech is forgettable. To be clear, I stand here today with knowledge on this issue because of my caucus colleague, the Honourable Laurie Scott, the Minister of Labour. Minister Scott has been a leader and a champion for the protection of women long before Me Too and Time's Up were popular social movements. Before Harvey Weinstein was a household name, before Jean Ghomeshi had a trial, before an allegation of groping against the Prime Minister was finally taken seriously. Minister Scott was talking about training judges, and she was the first in Ontario's legislature to bring the horrifying stories of women and girls being sex trafficked to the forefront with groundbreaking legislation saving the girl next door. Thanks to Minister Scott, myself, and many others in the Ontario legislature were then in on the dirty little secrets that are happening in every corner of Ontario, from rural and remote Indigenous communities to downtown, urban, and progressive cities like Toronto and Ottawa. That's when the sunlight started to shine on this dirty little secret. And I want to say to Minister Scott, thank you for your leadership at a time when people weren't talking about this issue. As Ontario's new Women's Minister, I plan on building on her work and expanding our reach so we can open the curtain for all to see. And that's why I'm here. We will not achieve gender equality in our province or in this country if we continue to turn a blind eye to this dirty little secret of sexual abuse and violence against women, which are happening right now with little girls as early as age 11. I have to ask you, if she is not equal, are any of us? This is much more serious than a hashtag. Again, while Me Too and Time's Up are important social movements that have shed light on horrible circumstances that women have faced, sex trafficking is taking place right now in this city throughout Ontario. It's organized, it's covert, and it's extremely profitable for violent criminals. It must be stopped. It could be any girl or woman who is sex trafficked. It could be your daughter. It could be the police officer's daughter in your neighborhood. It could be your children's teacher's daughter. The dangerous criminals who are preying on these vulnerable girls are undiscriminating, and I'll share some of their stories. But before that, I want you to consider this. In the recent coroner's report, sex trafficking of young girls was highlighted in their profiles after they died by suicide. These were girls in the care of the Crown. Between 2014 and 2017, when ministry officials, children's aid societies, and group homes should have been keeping a watchful eye and protecting these young women from sexual predators who've been exploiting them. As children's minister, I'm firm. That's unacceptable and that has to stop. The young women who are trafficked are often called part of a stable. They're treated like animals. You can believe it. If you can believe it, they're posted on a website called Leo List, where younger girls' photos don't include their faces. This came after something called Backpage went down because the FBI closed it down. But criminals always find another way, especially when it's as profitable as human trafficking. And sex trafficking cannot continue, but it will if we ignore it and normalize it. And I can assure you, as the minister responsible for women and children, I won't stop, and I'll use my voice so that we can make sure it's not normalized and it's not ignored. With your podium and my voice and our collective eyes and ears, we can and we will put an end to this criminal activity, which is a major source of funding for gangs and other illicit activity at the expense of vulnerable women who are abused. After all, you can sell cocaine once, but girls, several times a week, for years even. So understand this, when our police forces attack traffickers, they are attacking their profits, they are attacking their source of income, and they are busting up illicit and illegal activity. And I want everyone in this room, just for a moment, to think about where you were 10 days ago. You probably don't remember if you have a schedule like mine. So I had my staff pull up my schedule for the past 10 days. 10 days ago, I was preparing for a trip to the Yukon. Over those 10 days, I spoke to other provincial ministers about this very issue. I came home, I hugged my family, got over my jet lag, came back to Queen's Park, had a cabinet meeting, 2 caucus meetings, and a social policy meeting, and I've arrived here. But for Mackenzie, 10 days was all it took. From hanging out with her friend, who lured her as a young teenager to a party, to being coerced, drugged, sold around within a gang, and raped so badly that she had to wear a diaper for weeks after escaping, and she couldn't walk without shuffling. Thankfully, Mackenzie got out. She helped police with a composite sketch of her traffickers, and they were able to prosecute 3 convictions because she had the courage to testify. 10 days, that's all it took. Second person I want to talk to you about is Stacy. Stacy's 15. Stacy's from Barrhaven. For those of you who don't know where Barrhaven is, that's in my constituency of Nepean in the nation's capital. Stacy comes from a loving hockey family. And I want to make this point because I want to highlight that this could be any child. Barrhaven is one of the wealthiest communities in all of Canada, with one of the highest numbers of post-secondary graduates in the entire country. Stacy had more followers than me on social media, and she posted a lot of selfies, as teenagers do. Stacy would share every disagreement she had with her parents on social media. And there was a man behind the computer. His name was Peter, an older guy. He liked all of her posts. And then he started direct messaging Stacy, and she would build a relationship with him. He eventually took her to our local shopping center at Bayshore and bought her an expensive purse. Stacy felt valued and loved after she had had an argument with mom and dad. He groomed her. She thought Peter was her boyfriend. Then he coerced her. She was raped several times by several men in her apartment, and then she was forced to go to work. Stacy was sex trafficked from a wealthy community and a good, caring family at the age of 15 in our nation's capital, because Peter lured her and then manipulated her and promised her something that he was never intending to deliver. And then there's Heather. She also came from an affluent neighborhood in the city of Ottawa and was just about to start college when she met her bad boy boyfriend. What Heather couldn't know was that her boyfriend was involved in illicit activity. He'd be arrested on weapons charges, and when that happened, he and his friends stole her identity, ruined her credit, and then forced her into sex trafficking to pay their bills. She was first groomed by her boyfriend, and feeling trapped, ended up being coerced into trafficking. She was often drugged, and she was forced into the sex trade for 12 hours a day and 7 days a week. Her family and her entire social network cast her aside as a druggie. They had no understanding that Heather was dehumanized and sold repeatedly as a sex slave and turned to drugs to calm her anxiety. That was until she ran into a friend who was a social worker and knew that she was showing all the signs as quote unquote being textbook human trafficked. My friend and constituent, Cynthia Bland, herself a survivor and the founder of Voice Found, has been instrumental in helping these women and sharing their stories with me so I could in turn pass them on to all of you. Although she couldn't be here today, I'd like to take a moment to recognize her and other survivors who are working in this space with lived experience for their strength and perseverance. Not only in surviving the horror that is sex trafficking, but also for the courage to speak out and talk about their lived experience. While Cynthia's experience and knowledge has helped guide my work over the past 3 months, along with Minister Scott's, so too has Jolene McNeil. Jolene is a detective constable within the Durham Regional Police Sex Trafficking Unit. Jolene was also my best friend in high school. And this summer, at our 25-year high school reunion in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, we reconnected and had hours-long conversation about what she's seen on the front lines of law enforcement. So I want to say to Jolene, who's here today with one of her detectives at the Durham Regional Police, and to all of our men and women and all of our police forces who are on the front lines of combating sex trafficking, thank you. I recognize you are putting yourself in harm's way as you deal with Ontario's most dangerous and violent criminals who are architects of sex trafficking. And they are dangerous and violent. In our recent Guns and Gangs strategy, we point out that the funds exchanged in sex trafficking are among the biggest sources of income for gangs across Ontario and other illicit activity. As I was reminded this past weekend by Ottawa's Deputy Police Chief, sex trafficking for these criminals is minimal risk and high reward for 2 reasons. As I said earlier, first, drugs can be sold once, a girl can be sold multiple times a day. And secondly, it is very tough to prosecute and convict given the nature of grooming. Traffickers have conditioned on those they are abusing. Some are scared to talk. Some don't realize the situation that they're in until it's too late. And the idea still persists that there is just this one big bad pimp out there bullying women. We're sold on this TV and movie lie that women who are forced into sex trade are violently kidnapped. But in today's reality, sex trafficking is far more manipulative than that. Again, it's highly organized, it's well thought out, and these girls are groomed to be lured away from their social safety net. 80% of gangs operating in Ontario are in the business of sex trafficking. And they know where to find these young girls and how to trap them. As importantly, anywhere between 60 to 90% of children who have been exploited were involved in the child welfare system. The grooming of these children centers around growing pains every child endures. Only, add that with social networks and technology now serving as a cheat sheet for their insecurities, for those seeking to traffic them. Predators can remain far enough away to evade contact, but at the same time, never being further away than a pocket or a purse. Awareness is key. Getting there right after the first point of contact is incredibly important. After that, it becomes difficult for these girls to escape, and even more difficult to encourage a victim to come forward and report. Put yourself in their shoes for a moment. If you finally ever escape the hell you've endured over a 5-year period, are you likely to want to relive that in a courtroom? I didn't think so. That speaks to the key battleground: intimidation. Gangs will often use third parties for intimidation. I want to tell you about one survivor Jolene shared with me yesterday. She was threatened to the point that she could no longer testify in court. And just like that, the case was done. All the hard work their investigators in Durham put into the accused parties to jail them up had evaporated right then and there. And today, those guilty parties, those sex traffickers, those men who are sexually abusing women for profit, are walking on our streets in the GTA, continuing to victimize young women. The fear of reprisal against the lucky few who are able to get out is so great that even after their captors are put behind bars, they cannot bring themselves to do what they know is right, which brings on guilt, further adding to psychological trauma, and sadly, they don't get closure. Only 1 in every 50 cases makes it to court. That's why Mackenzie's story was so poignant. But not only that, the data that could help track how or where or when these acts are committed often can't be collected. To collect it, it will require the participation of those survivors who for the first time finally have the chance to get their life back, but may instead prefer to hold on to their secret. This is sobering, but it also provides all of us with an opportunity to act and to find solutions to this complex and sensitive web of problems. That's where we all need to be better, because survivors shouldn't be intimidated. Gang members should be intimidated. We need to be thorough in our planning, compassionate to those in vulnerable situations, and forgiving to those and unforgiving to those who exploit, abuse, and traffic women and girls. Within my ministry, that work is already underway. On that trip to the Yukon I told you about just before, we took a big step in the establishment of an anti-human trafficking task table that I will co-chair with the Federal Minister for the Status of Women. The newly formed initiative will provide a linked approach between provinces and territories for the first time so that we can address the problem that thrives on criminals slipping between jurisdictions. This isn't just a community problem. It's not just a provincial problem. This is an interjurisdictional problem that we have in Canada. I've also spoken to my federal counterparts about ensuring that the Criminal Code of Canada recognizes that sex trafficking and human smuggling are not exactly the same thing, so that when these perpetrators are charged and convicted, that they end up on the sex offender registry once and for all. Combining all that work with our government for the people, we have 4 pillars: enhanced justice sector supports, prevention and community supports, provincial coordination and leadership, and very importantly, Indigenous-led approaches. Our government uses a crossover approach between the Ministries of Community and Social Services, Correctional Services, the Attorney General, the Ministry of Labour, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Education, as well as Indigenous Affairs. We support mental health services, housing, and residential services for survivors, and enhanced police training specialized for youth workers for the front lines. But our children must be partners too. Our awareness and education campaign helps keep them a watchful eye on their friends and classmates to identify predatory behavior. And I've spoken with the Minister of Education about the steps we can take together to help our children alert and get active in this fight. Just last week, an 11-year-old girl in the city of Ottawa was trafficked. And thank God for our local police enforcement for saving her life. And this, I must say, is just more than just my ministry, and it's more than just our government. And as the Ottawa Deputy Chief says, it's really more than police just arresting the bad guys and organizing and finding and helping survivors. It's about all of us recognizing and understanding that this is not the sex trade. It is the violent sexual abuse of women and girls who are dehumanized, devalued, used, and abused. And recognizing and understanding that means we must be part of the prevention and protection chain. Everyone in this room, every organization that you are part of. We all have a role to play. We must have candid conversations with our daughters at a very early age. We need to build linkages with potential partners like banks who can track funds, like hotels who can train their staff to look for if a teenage girl is locked in a hotel room for days on end. Jolene tells me every single hotel in this province is home to a child being trafficked. We have to talk to restaurants, particularly fast food establishments, who will add posters in their bathroom stalls explaining what sex trafficking is, and as importantly, how to escape it. We need to talk about to shopping centers and their food courts. They need better security. Convention centers and planners need to explain to their guests what sex trafficking is. This is our collective responsibility. We must share Ontario's dirty little secret beyond this room, because you never know what could happen in just 10 days. Thank you.
Minister, thanks so much for that, and we'll do a proper thank you in just a minute, but we do have a few questions for the
sure.
audience, so
Okay.
I'd love to put to you.
Can I do what I do in question period, just not answer the question?
What do Ontarians need to know to keep themselves safe from human trafficking? And maybe if I can alter it a little bit in a selfish way, what do parents need to do to keep their kids safe?
You know what, I give you the example of, well, there are 2 girls that I talked about today. One was 11, one was 15. Coming from the nation's capital, I would assume all of you would think the nation's capital is safe. We a very wealthy community. The fact of the matter is they're going after girls that are that young. And it's criminal, it's child abuse, and we need to have a conversation with our girls early. And they have to understand when they're posting on social media that there's always going to be somebody looking for their vulnerability to prey on them, to lure them away, to groom them, and then coerce them. And, you know, girls at that age, I think, you know, those vulnerabilities are exploited. So we have to have a very serious conversation with our daughters. And if it's not them being trafficked, we have to make sure that they understand it's happening so that one of their friends who might be vulnerable isn't. I'll give you this example. My daughter is 13, and I was talking about Cynthia Bland and me going for a meeting while we were at lunch, and I was leaving, and I was talking about, I used the term in front of her, human trafficking, and she said, we had a presentation about that at school. I thought, that's great, that's fantastic. And she said, me and my friend Ariella wanted to raise money so we could buy back the girls. And so I think, we have to, awareness is key. As I'm told by policing, as well as those in the field with lived experience, as survivors, that right now, we're only right now helping the victims that have come forward. We're not doing enough on the prevention piece. And the prevention piece should be done in many ways with the help of the government, the aid of the government, but also we have to take personal responsibility as adults in recognizing that this is a serious issue of child abuse, and that we have a duty to report it, we have a duty to talk about it, and we have a duty to support those who are doing this important work in the field, whether that's our police forces or it's those who are helping survivors. So just don't ignore what I said today, and then you'll be fine.
What are your hopes for the future when it comes to Canada and the fight against human trafficking?
I think, having spoken at the Yukon last week at the federal, provincial, territorial meeting, I was actually making a presentation on women's economic empowerment. But I did finish and ad-libbed, as my deputy will tell you, I ad-libbed a little bit about human trafficking, because I think we can have all these conversations as women in politics or women in business, but if we're neglecting the fact that there's so many women who are being dehumanized and treated as sex slaves, then we're really not advancing further. So I was able to have that conversation, and we did walk away with a task table. Getting provincial, territorial, and federal support isn't always easy, particularly when you have different alignments within political parties, but this seemed to be one where people were very interested. And so I think that that's going to be an important step for us. I do know that the justice ministers in Canada are also, and public safety ministers are taking this to heart. So I think having more conversations like we're having here today at the Canadian Club, important. Working within our ministries, within our own government is important, and then making sure that we're looking at that interjurisdictional piece. It's very easy for these traffickers to move these girls, for example, from Windsor up to Kenora into Winnipeg. And so we need to continue to work together. And in fact, I think it was just last night where Peel Region, Ottawa, and Niagara police officers came together and busted up a ring right there just last night. So we have a lot of work to do. And so if you were to ask me this time next year, one, I hope we have a robust report that comes out of our task table. Second, I hope that interministerially here in the province of Ontario, we're leading in North America on how we respond to this. And just finally, that all of you today are having that conversation and not ignore it, and understand that this is a crisis, and it's one that we haven't talked about because it is so uncomfortable.
Great, thank you. And one last question, which is, well, maybe more of a wild card. You can take it in direct relation to the subject of your talk today, or go beyond it. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing Ontario right now?
I'll let the finance minister talk about that. I think, let me just go back and maybe to this topic, because I think the biggest challenge facing this one is actually having survivors talk so that we can get the data and that we can get the prosecutions. Because even if a girl escapes, the perpetrator, the trafficker, is going to find another girl, and he will sell her multiple times a day, multiple times a week, multiple times a year, and that's wrong. And so if I could just leave on this parting note, thank you all very much for coming. I know when you go to listen to a provincial politician, it's usually about the health care of the province, the education of the province, or the finances of the province, or some big legislation, like, for example, labor or something. And I don't think you normally would get up in the morning and think, oh, you know what, I think I'm going to spend an hour and a half listening to horrible crimes that are being committed across the province from a Minister of the Crown. So I want to say thank you to all of you, particularly the Canadian Club, for your leadership and allowing me to have the opportunity to speak in this topic. And hopefully together we can make a difference, and we can have that conversation together, because it's a terrible issue that we're confronted with. Thank you.
We're fortunate to have federal and provincial ministers come and speak at our podium with some regularity, but I can tell you it's pretty unusual to have someone address a topic that is both, I think, is emotional and in many ways frightening, as what we heard today from the minister. Certainly for me, as a father of two young girls, it was very, it certainly hit home, and I think looking around the audience, I know many other people, I'm sure, had a similar experience. Minister, it's really impressive, I think, to see your personal passion that you bring to this very important issue, and it's exciting that you're now in a position where you can have, I think, even more significant influence on it. So thank you so much for bringing that passion and thoughtfulness and sort of the bias towards action that you've brought today to our podium, and thanks for engaging all of us in this important conversation. Before we conclude, some highlights about some upcoming events. On November 1st, we welcome Minister Ahmed Hussein speaking about how immigration can help the middle class. And on Tuesday, November 6th, the country manager for Google will be here. Sabrina Jeremiah will be at our podium, outlining a blueprint for Canadian prosperity in the digital age. I hope you can all attend as well. Finally, I would like to thank Morneau Chappelle once again for supporting today's event, and also mediaevents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. And finally, thank you all for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.